All right, you're very welcome along. I'm Ciaran Bradley, and I'm delighted to say I'm joined now by the creator and writer of Netflix smash hit Top Boy, Ronan Bennett. Ronan, how are you keeping?
Well, Ciaran, well, thanks. Yeah, all good.
So whereabouts in the world are you at the moment?
I'm in Hackney. In London.
Good man, the font of Top Boy itself. So it's a good place to start, I guess. So it's been a hell of a process, kind of from the time that you initially wrote Top Boy, well over 10 years ago now. The story itself, even of getting to the screen, was an interesting one in that the BBC initially rejected things. It seemed to me a fairly natural home in Channel 4. I think Channel 4 was a good place for that kind of gritty drama. And then cancellation, unfortunately, kind of followed quite swiftly after that, and then it was picked up again by Netflix. It must be. It feels like it would be a natural thing to be the most personally invested in this as a project of all the things that you've done. I don't know if that's true to you.
Yes, it is. It's a very personal show, which might sound odd to some because it's a show essentially about Black people in London, and I'm clearly not. I'm white and Irish, but nevertheless, what I've done is, I guess I'm the kind of writer that sort of uses personal experience and riffs off that in character and storylines and so on. And I've pretty much I've poured a lot of personal stuff into Top Boy.
Yeah, I mean that comes across certainly when you read around the things that you've written about it, and obviously it spanned, without, and obviously go as far as you like with any of this, particularly difficult parts of your life. Obviously, with the passing of your wife in 2014, Georgina, and it was interesting just reading. It kind of lent a bit more real emotion to the scenes, like the one with Jamie and his brothers in the kind of memorial gardens when they're there, remembering their mum and dad. And my understanding, at least, is that that was something that you do with your children with regard to Georgina. So that really comes across very much.
Yeah, the scene with the brothers in Netflix season 1. They're on a park bench actually it's filmed in Victoria Park, which is a stone's throw from where I live. And it started my wife had just given birth to our daughter Molly in 2001, and we went to the park. It was a beautiful day, and Molly was only a few hours old. Georgina was a very strong, resilient person. She was up out of her hospital bed almost immediately, couldn't bear being in hospital. We went to the park. It was a stunning day, and there we were, our son Finn, our new daughter Molly, the two of us, and it was just great. When Georgina died 12 years later, 13 years later, I remembered that event, and so I took the kids down there on her birthday, and we celebrated her birthday. We just sat on the same bench and talked about her and so on. And then when I had the idea for Jamie being orphaned and his two brothers, and he being the one that had to look after them, and I wanted, you've got to dramatize that. I don't, a screenwriter never likes just to have characters sitting around talking, about what you want to do is externalize it. You want to create just a little bit of drama, something other than just talk. So I put them in the park on that bench, and I had them say hello to their mother, and whose birthday it was. I think they were celebrating, and in the new season it's the father. And so that was me drawing from real life and putting it in Top Boy.
Well, it's a really beautiful scene, actually, and I think it lends quite a bit of light and shade in regard to, they're often such a gritty, murderous situation they're in. It's kind of familiar with that.
I mean, there's a scene, just if you, sorry to interrupt, but just to expand a little bit. There's a scene in the new season, in Top Boy season 2, of when Dushane's mother Pat is home from hospital, and they assemble a hospital bed. I mean, if somebody is sent round from the trust or whatever it is, the hospital, to assemble a bed, and then they move her to the bed. And that again was what happened with Georgina. She was dying of cancer, and it was in her last days, and she was at home with us, and they needed a hospital bed for her to be able to, for the nurses to get access to her properly and so on, to make her more comfortable. And they sent round a technician who assembled the hospital bed. But when I said, can you help me get her into the bed? The guy said, sorry, health and safety, I'm not allowed to do that. So I called some friends, including Jerry Jackson, who is a story consultant on Top Boy, an old friend of mine. And he and another person came around, and Georgina's sister was there. And the four of us moved Georgina from her bed to the hospital bed in the same way that we see in the scene. So I do, and it doesn't always have to be, a bit bleak like that. I also, I'll take funnier stuff or silly stuff as well. But I'm one of those writers that, probably most writers do it. We observe a lot. We listen to the way people talk. We remember sometimes dramatic things, but also small things, and then we find a way to put them in the.
Yeah, it was that scene particularly with the bed. It was that kind of low key officiousness that just seemed so cruel in that situation to the viewer at least, and it was very well executed, I think.
Thank you.
You speak very briefly there about Jerry Jackson. I found Jerry to be a really interesting kind of character in the development of Top Boy generally. Jerry, correct me if I'm wrong, of course, was a community leader within Hackney, obviously somewhere you've lived for, I believe, over 20 years now at least, and was was crucial in kind of knitting you into the community of people who would be dealing or whatever it might be, or affiliated either loosely or otherwise with gangs. It occurred to me, I remember someone saying a while ago that scripts, even when they're finished, are kind of an invitation to collaborate. They're not kind of set in amber. They're just pretty much like, here you go, here's my idea of things. Jerry, it seems like, was a very key character in the development of this story ending up where it is. Would that be fair to say?
Totally. I mean, it would be fair to say that without him, there would be no Top Boy. He was the first person I went to really just to muse about what I had seen that had given me a kid at my local supermarket just outside dealing drugs. And so I mused about that, and he was the one who put me in touch with, they call them roadmen. I mean, people who live their lives, make their living on the road. And he has such a solid reputation that he vouched for me, and it opened doors. It made them confident. I went to talk to them. I recorded most of the interviews at the time. This is going back more than 10 years. But it really opened up a world that for me had been invisible. I'd really never taken much notice of it. I'm barely aware of it.
Yeah, it's interesting. And just coming back to what you were saying about your writing process, I guess, and consciously and subconsciously being affected by, what's around you. It's difficult to, it would be easy to think that there's some parallels between the Black community in certain parts of London and the Catholic community in Belfast in the 60s and 70s. Now, I don't want to create too crass a kind of comparison there, because there are obviously moving parts within those. But it does feel that there's an element of that kind of no blacks, no dogs, no Irish, feeling of kind of exclusive, this is a club that you're not welcome in, at times, that kind of imbues the show in a way that just makes it feel like a lot of these particular younger people didn't really have much choice. Like, society had kind of decided, look, you're not really for us, we're not for you, go do what you need to do.
I mean, it's not surprising to me that you quote the no blacks, no Irish, no dogs line, because that very much was in my head as I was thinking about Top Boy, and continue to think about it, is that, I came from a community that was demonized. The Irish Catholic community, nationalist community in the north. It was demonized. It was shut out. There was discrimination. And when I came to London, you kind of look around and you kind of go, oh, these people, the black community, the brown community was equally treated as an object of suspicion. They were other, they were different. And it took me two minutes to make that comparison. And at the premiere we had for this season of Top Boy, I was on stage introducing the films, and I said, look, I said exactly this, and I said, that famous poster, infamous poster of No Blacks, No Irish, No Dogs, was something that inspired me. And then I also cited Phil Lynott, who, with the T-shirt, more blacks, more Irish, more dogs. And, pretty much everybody there understood that.
Yeah, it's a powerful thing, and it comes across in space. It's interesting to me. So my kind of background, I grew up in the southeast or whatever, and my friends and I would have kind of been into like garage and grime or whatever when we were growing up. Which
really, okay, right.
Yeah, yeah. So it's just interesting seeing the development of people like Ashley as obviously Duchesne and Kane as Sully. I don't mean to put words in your mouth, but have their performances, given that they were at least primarily musicians and obviously creative in their own right, but have their performances and development of their characters over the series, have they surprised you in that sense? Because in particular, Kane's as Sully, I think he's one of the most layered characters out there now, and it's just remarkable to see.
It doesn't surprise me at all. I mean, they're both incredibly talented. But what I think you referred earlier to a screenplay being something. It's not the finished object unless it's I don't know, David Hare or Pinter or something like that. But Top Boy isn't like that. Top Boy requires a vast collaboration. There's Jerry Jackson we've talked about, but there are literally dozens of other people involved in this process, and that includes the actors who, when I write a character, I do have something in mind. I can visualize that character, but the minute the actor is cast, if it's somebody as strong as Ashley or Kane, I forget the image that I had. And then what I want them to do is to bring, what they have to the part and to make it their own. Sometimes that involves, dialogue changes, but they're relatively few, but even so, dialogue changes are not the most important part of a screenwriter will tell you that of the various passes that you do at a script, the dialogue pass is the easiest because it doesn't involve structure. It doesn't involve changing the structure, changing where things go, anything like that. So words on the page do change, but the most important thing that they bring to it is not, oh, I can say this line better than Ronan's written it. The most important thing they can bring is that inner part of themselves that allows them to inhabit and grow the character. The character grows from season to season because of what they bring to it.
Yeah, it was so striking. I mean, to be honest, it's interesting even when you talk about how to talk about each of the series. So, for example, for me, there are 4 series, obviously, Top Boy with Summerhouse, or as it's now called. But even seeing that development of just the way it looks and the way it sounds, like from the first series of Summerhouse, which I absolutely thought was fantastic, and I thought that the actors who played Ronell and Jem and all these lads and Driss even were phenomenal from the get-go. Actually, Driss has got an interesting one. So the actor who played him was kind of found almost by accident. Is that right? Or
he was found by accident. What had happened was that Jan de Monge, who directed the first Channel 4 season, and Des Hamilton, our casting director, had gone to look actually, they were with the locations manager, and they'd gone to look at a block of flats. I was working at home just round the corner on another project with actually an American screenwriter, a friend of mine. And I got a call to say they were just round the corner and could I join them? So we went round. My American friend, Jeremy, and I walked round. Jerry was there as well, Jerry Jackson. And they were looking at the block of flats, and they noticed Sean Romulus, who plays Driss. And Jan really liked the look of him. And it turned out he was a nephew of Jerry's. And so they arranged an audition, and Sean went and he nailed it. And that was it. So he was in 3 seasons.
I mean, he does so well as well.
It's random, but not completely random. I mean, we were looking in the right place.
Yeah. I was just thinking it's kind of remarkable when you look at the cast well over all 4 seasons, but really in the last 2 with Little Sims and Dave and Ashley and Kane, and people who are immensely creatively talented musically, but just for them to come together into this kind of alchemic situation must be so satisfying to kind of see. I just wonder from as of this point now, so once all the kind of the writing's done, the editing's done, it looks it's out there, how easily does it sit with you, the review process and the critical side of things? Is it easy for you to kind of let go of your baby in that regard into the big bad world?
Well, we for this season we had some very early phenomenal reviews. I mean, they were just really positive. So once they came in, I felt pretty confident about what we had, and so that part of the process has been quite easy. And then the second part that you're looking for are the numbers. And because they're the ones really, I mean, I think most studios and broadcasters, they like to have the reviews, but they prefer the numbers.
Yeah, numbers, man. That's true.
Yeah. And but we got both, so I actually feel quite relaxed now about it. I'm relaxed from a position of having had praise heaped on the show for the last 2 or 3 weeks, so it's easy to feel relaxed.
And how much kind of downtime do you get before you have to stick the nose to the grindstone again for season 3?
The nose is at the grindstone.
Yeah.
So when I wasn't able to meet you on Friday, it was because I was in the production office and there were issues to resolve. So that was
fair play. Well, good luck with all that. And just in that regard, what have Netflix and I'll rephrase this. So teenage kids can be the most cutting critics at the best of times, and I imagine that your cool points as a dad went through the roof when you were able to say, "Oh, I'm just off to meet Drake today."
Massively. Yeah, that did help. Just saying, getting a call and then saying to my 2 kids, I've got to go and meet someone called Drake. I think Drake was, by the way, he's a very nice man. I haven't met him 6 or 7 times, I guess, and all, but he's always been very modest and just very approachable. The young cast completely love him, and he was very good with them. He made time for them and everything like that. So it was, I wasn't sure at all who I was going to meet that first time. I think he's kind of probably a little bit amused that I'd never heard of him, but
but that's
I have now.
Yeah, I'm sure. But it's kind of nice that you were going into that conversation with a blank slate, though, because it really just kind of it eases any, I don't know, not tension, but just kind of a, hey, what do you think of the show? What do you think you can bring? And then he adds it to it.
Yes, but it was also partly because he and his guy Future, his manager, or they weren't being big shots. They didn't behave like they were there. They said to us, "We want to add fuel to your fire." That was what they said.
That's fantastic. Just to move on to a slightly different topic. You would be similar, I guess, actually, to my father. My dad moved away from the north kind of relatively young, and set up in London. Without putting too fine a point on it, what's your relationship with Ireland and Irishness like? Like, are you back often, for example? Is it, I presume it's quite important to you, but I just wonder how it manifests itself.
No, it's a very good question, because I've spent 2/3 of my life now, or more than 2/3 of my life, out of Ireland. It remains central. It's, I follow the news there. I follow it in the papers, but also on Twitter and social media, both north and south.
Mm.
So it's absolutely crucial. And I think it's kind of crucial to identity. I don't want to be one of those, immigrants who has been away for so long that they get kind of misty-eyed about it, and nostalgic and romantic. I've got no use for that. But I think about it a lot. I read about it a lot. I've talked to friends there a lot. Before the pandemic, I would go back a couple of times a year at least, to see family. That's changed with the pandemic.
And what about your kids? Would they, be back with you? And is that something you're, I don't want to put words in your mouth, but is that something you're trying to pass on, kind of keep that link, I guess, between the two?
I don't have to pass that on. They've sort of picked it up. They both have Irish passports.
Mm-hmm.
It was before Brexit. It was to do with it, way before Brexit. It was to do with identity. I just wanted them to be aware of that. Molly, my daughter, is studying at Trinity in Dublin.
Ah, fantastic.
So loves Dublin, and did a tour. Years ago, I hitchhiked from Belfast to Limerick and back up again, and she didn't hitchhike, because nobody hitchhikes these days. Her and a couple of friends did a car trip down the west coast and then back up again to Belfast. So they're connections, yes.
Mm. And when you look at, say Belfast in particular,
by the way, sorry, where is your dad from?
Sorry, he's from Derry.
Oh, Derry. Okay, right.
Yeah, so he moved over when he was 18 for university, and it was kind of interesting. It became a bit of a light ribbing family joke that, like, he would laugh uproariously at anything Irish that came on TV, and blah blah blah. But it is like, I understand it all the more, having been here now for kind of 5 or 6 years, that I think you develop a weird sense of defensiveness towards your, well, whichever country. So, for example, my situation, I'd be half English, half Irish, and I find that, like, when people here would be particularly critical of England or Britain or whatever, I find myself weirdly defensive of it in a way that I probably wouldn't be quite so much if I was back home, and probably vice versa. So it's an interesting phenomenon. I'm always interested, as the people who are kind of in the creative throes of things, how one way or another that comes out, because I guess when you're characterizing people, when you're developing these characters, you're trying to imbue them with all different manners of personality.
Yeah, but I think what you've imbibed as in your formative years is absolutely crucial. It's crucial to the way you think about the world, and it's crucial to the things that you're interested in. Writers, the writer of, say, the creator of, say, Bridgerton, has their thing that they're interested in. It's not my thing. My thing is not, I'm not criticizing it at all, but it's just, we all have our own things. And that thing that we're interested in is, surely it comes out of, I believe it comes out of the experiences of particularly of our formative years, the things that really stick in our minds and never go away. And just seeing that kid on the, outside the supermarket selling drugs, that said to me, I didn't just see, a kid selling drugs. What I saw was, a world, a context, and think, how could this happen in, just around the corner from a very nice street where I and my neighbors live. But you have to have the curiosity to want to explore that more. Otherwise you walk past. And if you're a writer, a different writer picks something else that they see further down the street or around wherever. So I do think that's a long way of saying that I do think that, where you're born and those formative experiences, and also the kind of culture that you grew up in, the kind of, the kind of Norse black humor, which I love to go back and get a refresher course in. This was, I'll give you an example, but some years ago in Derry, in Shipquay Street, in a bar there, a Friday night and busy bar, and next to me was a young, early 20s couple, boy and a girl, and the fella kept asking, turning to the girl, and he kept saying, "Were you faithful? Were you faithful?" And he kept, over the course of about an hour, he asked her 2 or 3 times. And I was kind of listening a little bit. And in the end, she put her glass down like this, and she said, "You were in prison." And he said, "Yes, for 3 months." And it sort of stuck with me. It was a real kind of, an exchange. Well, I think of it as a quintessential Derry exchange, really, So it's quite funny.
Yeah, it's remarkable, really. Like, because I was thinking, just with regards, as you say, there's kind of world within a world that would easily pass under your vision, if say if you're me, or I always think of, sorry, just to divert briefly, the Hackney of 20 years ago is obviously so different to the one of even actually 15 years ago, where kind of tech companies started moving in. It became very bougie, and all this kind of arts crowd moved in, and frankly, I'm pretty conflicted on that in one sense. Like, I don't think that that's in and of itself a bad thing, but I do think that it's an interesting thing to try and imbue into your script, is that Hackney of contrasts and that London of contrasts, whereby you do have kind of Shane going into these artisanal kind of coffee shops and restaurants and things like this, and yet side by side you do have just this, just the depths of despair and deprivation alongside people paying £5 for coffees. It must be
but it's just the question about gentrification. Always, to me, always is like, just where do the poor people go? Because it's great to see the place, building new buildings and coffee shops and restaurants and parks, but where are they putting the poor people? And the answer is, they're shipping them out. They're just, it's either being pretty much forcibly shipped out. They're given no choice. You have to move, or economically they're just forced out.
Yeah. No, it's an exceptionally difficult issue to grapple with. Just on the point, to return to Ireland briefly, could you see yourself delving back into either the North or Ireland as a kind of island for any future projects that you might have planned? Or don't feel railroaded.
No, I don't know. I mean, it's something I ask myself a lot. By the way, I have something in production at the minute, a film that's set in the 1970s, and it concerns Ireland, the Ireland of the Troubles, but it's a kind of way of, through the 2 central characters. It's called, well, the working title is Borderland. It won't be called that when it comes out. The 2 central characters are Irish and English, and I pit them against each other, and it's partly as a way to explore in drama the difficult relationship between the 2 countries and our history, our shared history. I'd love to write a book about I'd love to write a novel about the Troubles. But we're at the point where I think we can almost have the last say now about the trouble. Enough time has elapsed that we can look back, from a vantage point that will allow us to be, more free in the stories that we tell. And I'd love to do that. I'd love to write the novel of the Troubles, but there's a lot of people in that market,
Well, I think it would be cathartic for a lot of people, frankly. I always find that you know, your generation and my father's generation, um, it's such a difficult thing to process. It's such a difficult thing to not let bleed into every part of your life in good or bad ways. Like, I think actually people in the North, generally speaking, are incredibly kind, incredibly sensitive. Like, you know, they're very, they're just really decent people. Like, and it's like, it's not that you don't get that elsewhere. It's just that having death and destruction on your doorstep and no more than 1 degree or 2 degrees of separation away from you just imbues you with a certain different aspects of life. And I think, yeah, there's a lot of people who could do with counselling, B, do with you know, some form of creative outlet to get that stuff across. But listen, just one last thing, sorry, before I let you go, Ronan. And again, this is just more out of personal curiosity. Something like The Wire in relation to Top Boy. Now, some people, you know, candidly or otherwise, have often referred to Top Boy as a British Wire, or Britain's answer to The Wire. I think it's, you know, I think The Wire is one of the most seminal programs we've had on TV for probably 30 or 40 years. And it's difficult not to be influenced in that way. Is that something, when it comes to a program like Top Boy, are you kind of actively trying to keep them separate, or are you trying to, you know, draw little aspects from one another, or how does that tend to work?
No, listen, like you, I'm just in awe of how good The Wire is, and but honestly, it's just not an influence. It's just not an influence. Maybe in one general sense, which was that I looked at it and I thought, oh, it's possible. Maybe I don't remember thinking this, but it's possible that the thought was there unconsciously, subconsciously, that, oh, it's possible to tell stories about Black people in, you know, doing in that world. But it wouldn't have gone any further than that. Also, as The Wire went on, The Wire became more of a police story. I mean, you saw far more of Dominic West's character, of, you know, McNulty and his friends, than you did of the guys on the street, particularly in the later
number 5
episodes. Yeah. So no, I never. To be honest, when I'm writing the show, all I'm interested in is the things that writers are interested. You know, it's like, which bit goes where? What does Duchesne want? What does Shelley want? What does, you know? How do I, you know, what obstacles do I put in their way? You know, so I do the kind of nuts and bolts of the, you know, what you do as a writer, rather than think of influences. Of course, we're all subconsciously influenced by so many things that at some level it may be operating on me, but I'm definitely not aware of it.
That's fair enough. Sorry, one very last thing. Just when it comes to any project, I guess, particularly one that you know, feel has some scope and length to it. Let's say, for example, when you started out Top Boy, did you have a rough storyline and plot in mind for 2, 3, 4 series, or was it literally just a case of get the first 1 or 2 done?
Well, you know, that's not the way the system works. You know, what you try to do is just, you know, you write and you hope that somebody somewhere will go, let's make this. I mean, you know, to get the green light for production, to get the order to make the show, that's the holy grail for writers and producers. That's what we're looking for. So to think beyond that, no, that just doesn't happen. Well, it didn't happen to me anyway. I think what you do is you hope that that if the first season is a success, that you'll come back. So, you know, you and I think you don't have to have a cliffhanger season finale. All you have to do is create interesting characters who are in trouble, or who often get into trouble, and then you won't have any problem about coming back. So that's the way I think of it.
No, and I can imagine it must be. It would be a mix of tempting fate if you did think that far ahead, and secondly, you know, you could just run yourself down any number of different avenues. But there we go. Ryan, listen, thank you so much for your time. I really can't speak highly enough of Top Boy. All 4 series, I think, are superb. So, yeah, highly recommended from me. I wish you all the very best with the rest of season 3. And yeah, feel free to give me a shout before that happens as well.
No, well, listen, thank you, and listen, say hello to your dad. It'd be very unlikely that we don't know people in common. So